I can hear them now. The roar that will soon tear through my flesh echoes off these stone walls beneath the Colosseum. My name is Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, and in minutes I will walk into that arena to face the lions. But here's what will shock you. I begged for this. Yes, you heard correctly. While other prisoners plead for mercy, I wrote letters during my journey to Rome asking that no one save me from this fate. You must think I'm insane, but let me tell you why a 70-year-old man would choose to become food for wild beasts. The chains around my wrists have rubbed my skin raw during these months of travel from Syria to Rome. Every step of this journey has been a countdown to this moment. The guards call me God-bearer in mockery, not knowing they speak more truth than they realize. I can smell the sand of the arena above me, mixed with blood from yesterday's executions. The sounds of 20,000 Romans thirsting for spectacle make my heart pound, but not with fear, with anticipation. If you've ever wondered what true faith looks like when everything is stripped away, when death stares you in the face and society demands you renounce everything you believe, continue watching, because what I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you think you know about conviction, purpose, and what it means to follow Christ to the very end. Emperor Trajan ordered my arrest not because I was a criminal, but because I refused to worship him as a god. In Rome, being a Christian isn't just illegal, it's treason against the divine emperor. They dragged me from my church in Antioch where I had served for decades, shepherding souls and building the foundation of what would become one of the greatest Christian communities in the ancient world. My congregation wept as soldiers bound me, not understanding why their bishop seemed almost relieved. The journey from Antioch to Rome takes months, and they parade condemned Christians through every major city as a warning to others. But something unexpected happened along the way. Instead of growing more fearful as we approached Rome, I found myself writing letters to churches across the empire. Not letters pleading for rescue, but letters begging them not to interfere with my martyrdom. "Allow me to be food for the wild beasts," I wrote, "through whom I can reach God." People ask me why I would write such things. Why would a bishop, a leader, a man who could probably negotiate his freedom, instead beg for death? Because I have seen something that most people haven't. I have touched the very heart of what it means to be united with Christ. And in this dark tunnel beneath the Colosseum, smelling the death and hearing the hungry beasts above, I have never felt more alive. You see, for years I preached about dying to self, about taking up your cross, about following Jesus no matter the cost. But words spoken from the safety of a pulpit are one thing. Here, with lions' roar echoing through stone corridors and my execution minutes away, those words must become reality. This is where faith stops being theory and becomes the most brutal, beautiful truth you'll ever encounter. The guards are unlocking my cell now. The crowd above grows louder, hungrier. In moments I will climb those steps into blinding sunlight and face the beasts that Rome hopes will destroy not just my body, but the spirit of Christianity itself. They have no idea that they're about to witness something that will echo through history for 2,000 years. If you have faith but have never been tested, stay with me. You're about to see what unshakable conviction truly looks like. If you have faith but have never been tested, continue watching to see what true conviction looks like. Let me take you back to where this all began, because my story didn't start in this death chamber beneath Rome. 6 months ago, I was living what most would consider a blessed life. As Bishop of Antioch, I oversaw one of the most vibrant Christian communities in the empire. Antioch, the very city where followers of Christ were first called Christians. I had respect, influence, a congregation that loved me. I could have lived quietly, keeping my faith private, avoiding the attention of Roman authorities. But Emperor Trajan had different plans. He launched a systematic persecution across the eastern provinces, determined to root out what he called this dangerous superstition that was spreading like wildfire through his empire. When his soldiers arrived in Antioch, they didn't come looking for criminals or rebels. They came looking for leaders. They came looking for me. I remember that morning vividly. I was preparing for morning prayers when I heard the sound of hobnailed boots on stone, the clink of armor, the harsh voices of men accustomed to obedience. My deacons rushed in, panic in their eyes. "Bishop, Roman soldiers surround the church. You must flee." But as I looked at their frightened faces, something strange happened. Instead of fear, I felt peace. A deep, settled peace that I had never experienced before. The soldiers burst through our doors during morning prayer. 20 armed men to arrest one 70-year-old bishop. They must have expected resistance. Instead, they found me kneeling at the altar, hands raised in worship, completely unafraid. "Are you Ignatius, the one they call Theophoros?" the centurion demanded. I smiled. "Yes, I am Ignatius, God-bearer." What he meant as an insult, I received as the highest honor. The trial was swift. Governor Trajan himself presided, expecting me to crumble under imperial authority. "Old man," he said, "you will worship the gods of Rome and burn incense to my divine spirit, or you will die." The crowd held its breath. Here was my chance to save myself, to give some token gesture and return to my comfortable life. Instead, I looked him in the eyes and said words that sealed my fate. "I will worship Christ alone, who died for my sins and rose again." The sentence was immediate: damnatio ad bestias, to be thrown to the wild beasts in Rome's great amphitheater. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some gasped in horror. But all I could think about was how perfect this was. Not because I wanted to die, but because I finally understood what Jesus meant when he said, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." The journey to Rome became unlike anything the empire had ever seen. Typically, condemned prisoners are transported in shame, hidden from public view. But something about my case captured attention. In every city we passed, Philadelphia, Smyrna, Troas, crowds gathered. Some came to mock, but many came seeking something I couldn't quite name. Hope, perhaps. Proof that faith could survive even this. What happened during those months of travel changed everything. Not just for me, but for the entire early church. And when you understand what I wrote in those letters, what I begged Christian communities to do, or rather not to do, you'll realize why my death became more powerful than my life. The guards are calling my name now. The crowd above is reaching fever pitch. But first, you need to know about the letters that would change Christianity forever. What happened next changed the history of Christianity forever. Don't stop watching now. Every night during that journey to Rome, by flickering candlelight in whatever prison cell they gave me, I wrote, not pleas for rescue, not appeals for mercy, but something that stunned everyone who read them. I wrote letters begging Christian communities not to save me. "Allow me to imitate the passion of my God," I wrote to the Romans. "I am wheat of God, and I must be ground by the teeth of wild beasts to become pure bread of Christ." You have to understand how radical this was. In the ancient world, martyrdom was seen as a tragedy to be avoided at all costs. Christians had developed networks to rescue condemned believers, bribing guards, arranging escapes, negotiating with authorities. When word spread that Bishop Ignatius was being transported to Rome for execution, plans were already forming to save me. That's exactly what I feared most. To the church in Rome, I wrote words that shocked them to their core. "I fear your love may do me an injury. For you can easily do what you please, but it is difficult for me to attain to God if you spare me." Can you imagine their confusion? Here was a bishop, a respected leader, begging them not to show mercy. My reasoning was simple but profound. This was my chance to be completely united with Christ in his death. In my letter to the Ephesians, I tried to explain what was happening in my heart. My love has been crucified, and there is no fire in me desiring to be fed. But there is within me a water that liveth and speaketh, saying to me inwardly, "Come to the Father." I wasn't speaking from depression or despair. I was speaking from a place of spiritual ecstasy that most people never experience. The guards began to notice something strange about me as we traveled. While other prisoners grew more desperate approaching Rome, I became more joyful. They whispered among themselves, "Was this old man losing his mind?" But I had simply reached a place where the temporary world held no terror because I had glimpsed the eternal. In my letter to the Trallians, I wrote, "It is better for me to die in behalf of Jesus Christ than to reign over all the ends of the earth." Word of my letters spread faster than our caravan traveled. Christians in cities we hadn't even reached yet were reading my words, debating them, struggling to understand them. Some called me foolish, others called me holy. I called myself what I was. A man who had discovered that some things are worth more than life itself, and that dying for Christ was not punishment but privilege. As we drew closer to Rome, Delegations of Christians began intercepting our journey, not to rescue me, but to understand. They looked into my eyes, searching for madness, and found instead a peace that defied explanation. In my letter to the Magnesians, I tried to capture what I was experiencing. Grant me nothing more than that I may be poured out as a libation to God, while an altar is still prepared. But the most shocking letter I wrote was to Polycarp, my dear friend and fellow bishop. Instead of asking him to remember me or pray for deliverance, I asked him to strengthen the church for the persecutions to come. The times demand thee, I wrote, as pilots demand winds, and as one tossed by tempest seeks harbor, so as to attain unto God. I knew my death would be just the beginning. The final letter I wrote was to the church in Smyrna, and in it I captured something that would echo through 20 centuries of Christianity. My spirit salutes the cross, which is a stumbling block to those that do not believe, but to us, salvation and life eternal. Tonight, as I prepare for dawn in the arena, these words feel more true than ever. The cross that Rome sees as defeat is actually our victory. If this kind of faith moves you, leave a comment about how your own faith has been tested. The walls of Rome rose before us like the jaws of some great beast, and I knew my time had come. Word of my arrival had spread through the capital like wildfire. The Christian community was in turmoil. Their beloved bishop from Antioch, the man whose letters had stirred the entire empire, was about to be fed to lions in their own city. Some wept openly, others plotted rescue. All struggled to understand why I seemed more excited than afraid. They brought me to the Mamertine prison, the same dungeon where Peter himself had been held decades earlier. As those massive iron doors clanged shut above me, I felt Peter's presence in that darkness. He too had faced this choice. He too had chosen faithfulness over freedom. The cold stone walls that had witnessed his prayers now heard mine. Lord Jesus, let me follow you completely, even unto death. Within hours a stream of visitors began. First came Onesimus, bishop of Rome, his face etched with anguish. Brother Ignatius, he pleaded, we have connections, people who can help. This doesn't have to happen. I took his weathered hands in mine and spoke the words that would haunt him for years. Do not show unseasonable kindness towards me. Allow me to be food for the beasts, through whom I can reach God. Next came wealthy Christians offering bribes large enough to buy my freedom. The amounts they mentioned were staggering, enough to purchase entire estates. Roman guards could be bought, officials could be influenced, even the beasts could be drugged. All it would take was money and my silence. But how could I explain that what they offered as salvation felt like damnation? I had come too far on this journey to turn back now. The most difficult visitor was Demetrius, a young man from my own congregation in Antioch, who had somehow made the journey to Rome. He fell at my feet sobbing, begging me to reconsider. Bishop, think of us who remain. Think of the work left undone. Think of the souls who still need your guidance. His tears nearly broke my resolve, but then I remembered Christ's words. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Even Roman officials seemed confused by my attitude. The prison prefect, a grizzled veteran named Marcus Severus, visited my cell the night before my execution. Old man, he said, I've seen hundreds of condemned prisoners. Most beg for mercy or rage against fate. You seem peaceful. Your people say you asked for this. Is that true? When I nodded, he shook his head in bewilderment and walked away. The psychological pressure was immense. Everyone, Christians and Romans alike, seemed determined to convince me I was making a mistake. They spoke of my influence, my wisdom, my years of service. They painted pictures of the good I could still do if I would just make one small compromise, burn one pinch of incense, acknowledge Caesar's divinity with a gesture that didn't really mean anything, but that's exactly what it meant. Everything. As dawn approached, I was moved to the cells directly beneath the Colosseum. The sound was overwhelming. The roar of 50,000 Romans gathering for the games, the snarl of hungry beasts, the clanking of machinery preparing for spectacle. This is where I wrote my final words, scratched into the stone wall with a nail. I am the wheat of God. I must be ground by the teeth of beasts to become the pure bread of Christ. What happens next will show you what unshakable faith truly looks like. Don't stop watching. The morning of my execution dawned crisp and clear. Through the small window of my cell, I could see Roman citizens streaming toward the Colosseum, excited for the day's entertainment. Families brought children, vendors sold food, nobles arrived in litters, all gathering to watch me die. Yet as I knelt in prayer on that cold stone floor, I felt no anger toward them. They didn't understand they were about to witness not entertainment, but worship. A young guard named Lucius brought my final meal, bread and water, the same elements I had blessed countless times as bishop, transformed now into my last communion on earth. As I broke the bread, I whispered the words Christ spoke, "This is my body given for you." In a few hours, those words would become literal reality in ways I never imagined when I first spoke them as a priest. The sound of my cell door opening echoed through the stone corridor. It was time, but instead of the rough handling I expected, the guards seemed almost respectful. Word had spread even among them about the bishop who welcomed death. "It's time, old man," the centurion said quietly. I stood, straightened my torn robes, and walked toward the wooden door that led to the arena floor. My legs trembled, not from fear but from anticipation. As we climbed the stone steps, the sound of the crowd grew deafening. 50,000 voices merged into one continuous roar of excitement. When we reached the final door, the one that opened onto the sand of the arena floor, I paused. Beyond that threshold lay everything I had prayed for, everything I had written about, everything I had begged God to grant me. The moment when faith stops being words and becomes flesh. The arena master, a massive man named Cassius who had orchestrated hundreds of executions, seemed puzzled by my calm demeanor. "Most men are begging or fighting by now," he said. "You seem ready." I smiled at him, this man whose job was death, and said simply, "I have been preparing for this moment my entire life." His scarred face showed something I didn't expect. Respect. They offered me the traditional blindfold, the wine mixed with myrrh to dull the pain. I refused both. I wanted to see everything, feel everything, experience every moment of this final act of worship. As they removed my chains for the last time, I flexed my fingers, feeling blood return to hands that had blessed thousands of believers over the decades. These same hands would soon offer their final blessing. Standing at that door, I could hear the lions in their cages beneath the arena floor, hungry, agitated, ready. The crowd above chanted for blood. Roman officials in their purple-striped togas lounged in marble seats, treating my death as afternoon entertainment. But I saw something else entirely, an altar prepared by God himself where I would offer the sacrifice I had promised in my letters. My final prayer was simple. "Lord Jesus, into your hands I commit my spirit. Let this death bring glory to your name and strength to your church. Let my blood be seed for the gospel in this great city." As I spoke these words, the door began to open, flooding the dark corridor with brilliant Roman sunlight. The roar of the crowd washed over me like a wave. It was time to complete the journey that had begun 70 years ago in a manger in Bethlehem. The moment you're about to witness changed the course of Christian history forever. The sunlight was blinding as I stepped onto the sand of the great Colosseum. 50,000 faces stared down at me from marble seats rising like cliffs on every side. The arena floor stretched before me, stained with the blood of countless victims, scattered with bones from yesterday's games. But as my eyes adjusted to the brilliance, I saw something beautiful. This vast amphitheater had become my cathedral, and I was about to celebrate the most sacred mass of my life. The crowd's roar was deafening, but underneath it I heard something else. The low, rumbling growls of the beasts waiting in the cages beneath my feet. 5 lions, they told me, starved for 3 days to ensure their hunger, trained to kill efficiently for the entertainment of Rome. The arena master raised his hand, and 50,000 voices fell silent. In that sudden quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. I walked to the center of the arena, my bare feet silent on the blood-soaked sand. Some prisoners run, some plead, some collapse in terror. But I knelt and raised my hands toward heaven, just as I had done thousands of times before my congregation in Antioch. "Father," I prayed aloud, my voice carrying in the acoustics of the great amphitheater, "thank you for this honor. Let my death glorify your Son and strengthen your church." The crowd stirred uneasily. This wasn't what they expected. Where was the fear, the desperation, the screaming that usually accompanied these spectacles? Emperor Trajan himself was watching from the imperial box, and I could see confusion on his face. This old Christian was supposed to break, to renounce his faith in terror, to show Rome's superiority over this dangerous superstition. Instead, he witnessed worship. The sound of the first cage opening echoed across the arena like thunder. A massive male lion emerged into the sunlight, its mane dark with captivity, its eyes scanning for prey. The crowd erupted in anticipation, but as the great beast padded across the sand toward me, something extraordinary happened. I felt no fear, only a deep, overwhelming sense of completion. This was the moment my entire life had been building toward. The lion circled me slowly, its powerful muscles rippling beneath golden fur. I remained kneeling, hands raised, eyes closed in prayer. "Jesus," I whispered, "let me imitate your passion completely. You died for me, now let me die for you." The crowd held its breath. Even the emperor leaned forward in his marble seat. Time seemed suspended between heaven and earth. When the attack came, it was swift and decisive. But in those final moments, something happened that witnesses would remember for the rest of their lives. As the great beast leaped, I looked up with a smile, not of madness or resignation, but of pure joy. The same joy a bride feels seeing her groom at the altar, the same joy a traveler feels glimpsing home after a long journey. "Into your hands," I breathed, and then darkness. But what the crowd didn't expect was what happened next. As my blood soaked into the arena sand, something began that would outlive Rome itself. In the stands, Christians who had come to mourn began to weep, not with sorrow, but with awe. They had witnessed something beyond martyrdom. They had seen transformation, seen death defeated by love, seen a mortal man become immortal through faith. My body was destroyed, but my example would build churches across the empire for centuries to come. What happened after this moment shocked the entire Roman Empire. The sand of the Colosseum was silent now, but across Rome, something had awakened that would never sleep again. Within hours of my death, reports began spreading through the Christian community that were impossible to suppress. They said that as the lions attacked, witnesses heard singing, not screaming, but hymns of praise rising from the arena floor. They said my face showed not agony but ecstasy, as if I was seeing something beyond the veil of this world. Emperor Trajan had intended my execution to serve as a warning, to demonstrate the futility of opposing Roman power. Instead, it became the most powerful sermon ever preached in his capital city. Within days, Romans who had never heard of Christ were asking Christians about the old bishop who had died with a smile. Centurions who had overseen countless executions spoke in hushed tones about the man who had transformed the arena into a sanctuary. My letters, which I had written during the journey to Rome, became treasures more precious than gold to the early church. They were copied by hand, carried to congregations across the empire, read aloud in secret gatherings. The words I had scratched in prison cells by candlelight became the foundation stones of Christian theology. My phrase, "the bread of God," entered the liturgy and remains there today, 2,000 years later. But perhaps the most profound impact was on how Christians understood martyrdom itself. Before my death, many believers saw persecution as tragedy to be avoided. Through my example and writings, they began to understand it as opportunity, the ultimate chance to prove that some truths are worth more than life itself. Polycarp, my dear friend to whom I had written my final letter, followed my example just decades later, dying with the same joy at the stake in Smyrna. The persecution I had welcomed spread across the empire like wildfire, but so did the faith that persecution was meant to destroy. Every Christian who died with courage inspired 10 others to conversion. Every martyrdom intended to weaken the church instead strengthened it. By the time Constantine legalized Christianity 2 centuries later, the blood of martyrs like me had become, in Tertullian's famous words, the seed of the church. Today, in churches around the world, my name is remembered not as a victim, but as a victor. Icons show me not in the moment of death, but in the moment of triumph, hands raised in worship even as the lions approach. Children learn my story in Sunday schools, young pastors read my letters in seminary, and believers facing their own persecutions find strength in the example of an old bishop who chose faithfulness over freedom. The Colosseum still stands in Rome, but it stands as a monument to the faith it tried to destroy. Tourists walk across the same sand where my blood was spilled, many of them Christians who come to remember the price of their freedom to worship. The empire that killed me crumbled into dust, but the church I died for has touched every continent and outlasted every kingdom. And so I ask you, watching this story unfold across the centuries, what would you die for? What truth burns so brightly in your heart that neither pain, nor fear, nor death itself could extinguish it? The same Christ I followed to the arena still calls people today, perhaps not to lions, but to smaller deaths. Death to pride, to comfort, to safety, to the approval of a world that crucified our Savior. My martyrdom was physical, but yours might be spiritual. The question remains the same. Will you follow him completely, whatever the cost? If this story has moved you, subscribe for more incredible stories of faith that changed the world. And remember, the same Christ who gave me strength is with you today.